Hello there, how are you doing? Hope you are doing well. Just a very quick video this week. I'm not doing the usual long video that I would normally do because I've got quite a lot going on. I am bombed, as they would say in the legal industry. Actually, maybe they say in other industries. However, I want to stress that bombed means exceptionally busy. Bombed does not mean that you are essentially being bombed. That's more of a military term, I'm sure. That is not happening. It's certainly, when you have a litigation, it never goes to those sorts of tactics. But yeah, I won't have time to do my normal video and send it off to my video editor, Steven Spielberg, who of course puts in the special effects and tries to make me look both witty and handsome. Needless to say, you can say he has never actually come up with the goods just yet. But I want to talk about something that I've talked about before, but it was just sort of in the mind of tech companies at that point, but now it is a reality, and that is the contact tracing apps that have finally, well, not gone mainstream, but they've come out. So both Apple and Google have released software updates for their devices. You can see I'm a Doctor Who fan there, I've just realised. Software updates for their devices, which now embedded in the operating system, the contact tracing system, which uses Bluetooth. So it means your Bluetooth is essentially always on. Your phone acts like a bit of a Bluetooth beacon, and as you come into contact with people who've registered as having the illness, then it will warn you, or rather if you're using an app, it will tell the app, which then will hopefully warn you, but may also send your personal data to someone depending on how the apps are going to be used. And there are lots of problems, not necessarily with the Apple and Google implementation, although I'll talk a bit about the Bluetooth issue later on. But one of the big problems is that apps that are using this have been slow on the uptake. I think at best you've got a 41% uptake. And remember, that's 41% of people who have actually been able to essentially download the app to their operating system. So I'll talk about that a bit later on as well. People are very confused. People are very, very worried about privacy. And it seems that no government who is rolling out contact tracing apps, no state, no organisation has really got to grips with what they should be doing in terms of privacy and whether they should be allowed to collect location data, which I suppose would be quite useful, what they should do with your personal data, who they can pass it on to, how it's stored, how it's going to be secured. So it's become a bit of a nightmare, and it's not really helping with the COVID-19 issue. We've also got concerns from security professionals that having a Bluetooth always on beacon on your phone puts you at risk of falling foul of a Bluetooth vulnerability. Perfectly valid concern. Quite often it's possible to then use your Bluetooth connection to execute malicious code, possibly take over your device or do something nefarious. There is also the issue that I said that there's a new update and not everyone is able to download it. A lot of the people who may need a contact tracing app, we're talking about the elderly. I mean, my mother, who is certainly in the risk group, she doesn't actually have a mobile phone. Now I think about it, she had one briefly, which I think was an old one of mine, but I don't think she ever switched it on. But those people aren't even in this whole program. There's no way that they will know if they've come in contact. That's not going to work. Some of the arguments we've had about why you need an app which will then automatically collect data, use your personal data and send on to health authorities, been to help the elderly who may not be able to manage the phone, but their phone probably can't handle the contact tracing app in the first place, so it becomes a bit of a moot point. So you've got issues on that. So essentially you've got a system whereby you need the latest and greatest operating system on your phone. There may be some vulnerabilities depending on how the Bluetooth beacon is working. We will have to see, but it's only going to essentially be available to a small percentage of the population. Those who do download it, they've had to have overcome some issues over privacy, so they're not downloading it, and as yet in no country, as far as I'm aware, is such a process mandatory. So the thing is a little bit of a failure, I have to say. It's not the technology that's letting it down, but rather the implementation has been so flawed, so ill thought out, as many countries' responses to the COVID-19 crisis have varied, and there have been winners and losers, as you can see if you go in the press. We'll have to see how it goes from there. Now, there's another issue, and this is something, I mean, I talked all the other stuff, I kind of predicted this would be a problem, and my predictions came true, so well done, Junior Nostradamus over here. But there's another problem which I hadn't thought about. I was reading a brilliant article in Forbes, and one of the concerns is that as these contact tracing updates go live, it becomes a cybersecurity risk, not in terms of your phone being taken over, but in terms of phishing attacks. So it's not too far to say, first off, you may, if you're on more likely, I suppose, if you're on Android with the Google Play Store than if you're on iOS, but you never know. You may download an app that actually is a malicious contact tracing app that isn't doing anything whatsoever, isn't even enabled to work with the system that Google and Apple have uploaded, but it's still asking you for your personal data, and it's essentially a phishing app. And you may find a number of these malicious apps make it onto the stores. That's problem number one. Problem number two, I guarantee you will start getting phishing emails saying you have been in contact with someone who has COVID-19. If this doesn't happen, please, if you're a hacker and you're listening, don't suggest this is a phishing thing. It's just a very childish and very mean thing to do. Please click this app, put in your personal data, it will tell you what to do. Stealing your data, it may even have stupid things like stealing your credit card data. Suddenly the whole program of using technology, which is a noble cause to try and fight an awful, awful disease, becomes a mess. Becomes basically a position where it can be used by malicious actors, by health authorities who don't really understand what they're doing with the data, by governments who don't really understand what they can and cannot collect. And big tech sort of wins, and that it seemed to have done the right thing, but ultimately it's data privacy, more than I thought, as I first thought, that pretty much loses out. So yeah, I'm not impressed so far. I haven't downloaded the update yet. I'm going to, and I may even download a contact tracing app and see how it works. Hopefully it won't tell me that I've been in contact with loads of people who are ill, or steal all my data and sell it to somebody and I start being sold, I don't know, some device that I don't really need. Maybe one of these ridiculous, there's been all these sorts of health cures that don't really work. I see people in Hong Kong wearing these devices around their neck that emit a blue light. Not entirely convinced that works. Makes you look like a very low rent Cylon from Battlestar Galactica instead, but there we go. But yeah, it's been a bit of a mess. Now, is it going to get better? Is there going to be any guidance from Apple or Google beyond the stuff where they're saying you can't collect location data to make things work? I don't think so. Unfortunately, I don't also think that any of the governments running this will necessarily get their heads around it in time. I think they'll understand what to do eventually, and they'll come up with a robust system. But I don't think they'll do it in time by the time the cases have started to drop and becomes less of a requirement. I was talking to someone here in Hong Kong about a COVID-19 vaccine and SARS, and they were like, was there ever a SARS vaccine? And I was like, well, no, they were working on it. But what actually happened, this is quite interesting, is by the time that they thought that they were nearly there, it was no longer required. SARS had essentially, cases numbers had gone down and down, down, it died out, so they just stopped. Now, I don't think the same thing's going to happen with COVID-19, but I do think we'll get in a position where they think, well, actually, we don't need a technological contact tracing solution. There are so many concerns with data privacy that we're not going to spend time on that because people won't download it unless we force them, and generally we can't force them. And so it just falls down the wayside. So it's all been, I think, a bit of a storm in a teacup or a storm in a petri dish in terms of how excited it was. It shows the example of tech companies and organisations and health authorities all trying to do the right thing, but really making a hash of the implementation. The worry is something goes wrong with it all. There is people losing money being hacked, or something, or falling foul of phishing attacks, or it's not actually targeting the people who most need it, which would be those who are at risk who may not have the device to use the contact tracing apps in the first place. There is obviously all of that risk that it all goes wrong, and then people become very hostile towards these things. Good for me. I mean, I'll be pleased that it raises awareness of data privacy, but bad for any attempt in the future to use tech to potentially prevent these epidemics, these pandemics happening ever again. So there we go. That was an update on COVID-19. It doesn't trip off the tongue, does it? It needs some sort of a better name than that. But COVID-19 contact tracing apps. The whole saga hasn't finished yet, but I have a feeling it's already facing its death knell. Certainly the UK has just been starting to roll them out, and there doesn't seem to be much of an uptake. And of course, everyone's worried what will happen with their data. But we'll see what happens. I don't think it bodes well. What is interesting is that it may create an environment where similar sorts of apps, not just in terms of contact tracing, but in terms of location sharing, also start to lose popularity. Do you know when everyone was checking into Facebook to say where they were, and then people realised that you're making that your public profile? That was an ideal time for a burglar to go and burgle your house because they knew you were down the pub. It may go the way of that sort of thing too, but we'll see. But anyway, interested in your thoughts. I'm particularly interested in a way that it could actually win back some trust and be implemented properly by, say, a health authority or nation state that then acts as a roadmap for the rest of the world. Though again, I think that ship has sailed. Do let me know, do make some comments. But if you have any questions, speak to me. By all means, you can get in touch with me via LinkedIn, or you can comment on YouTube if you're watching us on YouTube, though I think most people do comment on LinkedIn. And in the meantime, have a good week. Hope it's as busy as mine. Hope it's as fun as mine. I'm hoping mine's going to be fun. I'll be back again very, very soon. Take care.